Hi, it's Steph, and welcome to my first garden tour of the 2023 gardening season. It is spring now and things are waking up and looking nice and green, and we have some things in bloom. So let's go ahead and hang out for a bit and I'll show you around the garden. This Dr. Merrill magnolia in the corner here is done blooming now, but a couple of weeks ago it looked absolutely stunning. It has these large fragrant white blooms, and it's a very early blooming tree in my garden. It usually blooms within the first couple of weeks of April, and the blooms only stick around for a week or two, but it is quite the show, and I really love this tree. Back in the fall, I had taken you bulb shopping at Aldi, and I picked up a few of their bulb packs, and I used them here in these planters in front of my shed and in my window boxes, and they have been blooming for about a week now. So they're actually starting to fade, but I really enjoyed having the spring color in my window boxes this year. And here in the corners of my shed beds, I did tuck some tulips in. Now, I don't plant a ton of tulips, mostly because I have lots of deer, but I do love having a few pops of spring throughout the garden. My Angelina Stonecrop sedum is looking absolutely gorgeous. I even let this sedum kind of grow in and around the pavers and the cobblestone here on this bed, and I really love the look of it. In this bed, I also have this clump of iris, and this is called Iris variegata Pulido albo. It's got variegated foliage, and it has a lavender colored bearded iris bloom, and the bloom spikes will probably show up in about a month. But for me, the foliage alone is reason to grow it. The little lime hydrangeas have started to bud out. The lamb's ear is also looking beautiful, full of fresh new growth. I just love this variety. This is the Helen von Steen lamb's ear, and it's a non-blooming variety, but it offers so much in just the texture and look of the blue-gray foliage. It looks more green in the spring, and it gets more of a blue-gray as the season progresses. My Katsura Japanese maple is starting to unfurl. It's only about half open at the moment, but this is a gorgeous Japanese maple. Its spring color is absolutely stunning. It looks like a fireball. It is yellow and orange and red. Really beautiful. It's been planted here for about 3 years, and it's already put on such a good amount of growth. Here in my back woodland bed, I have this magnolia shrub. It's an Ann magnolia, and I picked this up on clearance about 3 years ago. And I planted it here, and for the last couple of years, it didn't do a whole lot. But this year, it's had the most buds and blooms that it's ever had. So that tells me that it's happy in this spot. And I've been really loving this pop of pink against all of the green in the woods behind it. Right near my magnolia, I have this clump of pulmonaria, or lungwort. It's a really beautiful variety called Silver Bouquet, and it blooms with these tiny little violet blue, purple, and pink blooms in April. And once the blooms are gone, the foliage gets a lot larger, similar to what Brunnera does. And the foliage is really pretty. It's like a silver, gray, and green, and I've really enjoyed this plant in my garden. In fact, it's given me 2 little baby seedlings that at some point I'll be able to transplant somewhere else. In this bed, I also have another ground cover that's actually in bloom at the moment. This is called Lamium, or dead nettle, and it's a golden variety, which is really pretty. It has this gold yellow color, and it's in bloom at the moment with these little pink blooms. The hellebore that we cleaned up a couple of months ago, it has put on a bunch of new foliage, but unfortunately I lost all of my blooms to that polar vortex we had a couple of months ago. So this year there will not be many hellebore blooms to enjoy, but I'm glad to see they survived and the tufts of green are looking nice and healthy. In this other woodland bed here, my Geranium macrorhizum ground cover is looking nice and healthy and full. That will start blooming probably in a few more weeks. And I also have a couple of bleeding hearts that I peppered around this bed, and they were grown from bare root. I planted about 2 white and 2 pink. The 2 pink have been here for about, this might be its 2nd season. And the white ones, only 1 came up. And that one is not yet in bloom. The Eastern Redbud is also in bloom. And I just love these trees. They have such pretty blooms in the spring in this purpley pink color, like a fuchsia. But they also have these really large heart-shaped leaves. So it just makes for a really pretty tree. And it has fall color. The leaves turn yellow in fall. Here in one of my front borders, last fall, I decided to plant a bunch of daffodil bulbs, and I'm glad I did because I've been really enjoying the way they look. Now with daffodils, you do have to wait until the foliage dies all the way back so that you can cut it, because the foliage is what's going to provide your bulb with energy so that you get blooms next year. This golden shrub you see here is called a candy corn spirea. It starts off with a really vibrant red, and then it turns this golden orange color before it changes again to a chartreuse shade of green. And in summer you'll get these clusters of pink blooms. It's a really great long season interest dwarf or petite shrub. It's by Proven Winners, and it's called the candy corn spirea. The Semfall spirea is almost done leafing out, and I just love the spring color of this shrub and its fern-like foliage. It's a really beautiful accent. The front porch pots are starting to bloom. I find it so funny that the daffodils on this side are blooming, but the ones on the other side are just starting. I did rotate the baskets a couple of times to make sure they were getting equal sun. I just think that the batch on the left is more ambitious. And the tulips are kind of short this year, which is sort of a bummer. I did a little bit of research, and it seems as though even though we had 3 days of really freezing temperatures, we didn't have enough cold weather so that they could grow properly. And we've also been kind of dry this spring. It started off wet, but we haven't had any rain in a couple of weeks. So I think that really did affect the height of the tulips. Last spring, I had a whole border of mixed tulips going down the walkway, and I didn't plant any this year, but I also didn't pull up the ones that were here. And while they are much sparser this year and smaller, I'm happy to see a few of them did return. This Mary Fleming rhododendron is starting to bloom. This is a dwarf rhododendron. It only gets to be about 18 inches tall and wide. Has small leaves similar to the PGM. And it's just now starting to have its buds open up. I'm not sure what's going on with the foliage, if that is some kind of winter burn or some kind of disease, but I'll have to look into that. In this bed here by my driveway, last fall we had planted some new to me spring bulbs. One of them was a giant snowflake called Leucojum gravtii, and it is in bloom. It's a larger version of the snowflake. The daffodils that I had blooming here by my driveway beds are done now. I have 2 varieties planted here. I have the Ice Follies and the Ice King. So I went through and cleaned up all of the blooms, and I left the foliage, and my creeping phlox is now in bloom. And I also deadheaded the armeria, which is also blooming well. On the end here, I have a different variety of daffodil that is now starting to open up, and it is called Cheerfulness. It's a tiny bloom, but there are multiple bloom heads on one stalk. And it's a really sweet looking daffodil. This island bed that we created last fall just got a refresh with its mulch. It was the first mulch job that we did this spring. And it was actually low on mulch last fall when we created it, but we couldn't get a lot of mulch at that point because it was end of season. So we did what we could with what we had, and recently I took advantage of the sale at the Home Depot. We picked up a bunch of bags and we were able to refresh this area. Unbelievably, it took 22 bags, so quite a bit, but it's looking ready for the season. The Carl Forrester reed grasses that I divided, I had 3 of them over by my shed. I dug them up, I divided them in half, and I made 6, and I planted a grouping of 3 here and a grouping of 3 down the other end, and I'm happy to see that they returned. The ivory halo dogwoods are starting to leaf out. And I recently divided some sweet flag ogon, and I planted it in the front of this bed for a pop of yellow. I planted a clump here and a clump on the other side. I did cut it when I transplanted it, just so that I can get some new foliage. And I think this will look really pretty here. These Iceberg Alley sage leaf willows that I purchased on clearance last year, they're actually in bloom. They have these little catkins that have this little bit of a red and yellow. Really pretty. Here in my patio bed, I have some spring color with some daffodils. I did also add a grouping of some tulips this year, and the color that I picked is coordinating so well with these peachy apricot cream type daffodils that I have planting here, and I'm really loving the combination. My Japanese maple is all budded up, and it should be unfurling shortly. I finally brought out my bird bath for the season. And I can't believe how large my alliums have gotten. This is the allium foliage here. I have the Globe Master and 2 other varieties of large alliums. And along the front of this bed, I am playing with the idea of adding a boxwood border. I found these boxwood at Lowe's recently. They're called Green Gem, and they're a more compact variety. They're only supposed to get about 2 by 2 and grow in a globe or spherical shape. So I am going to give those a try, and I think it'll look really pretty to offer a bit of structure along the front as well as some evergreen color in this bed. This tulip variety is called Daydream. It starts off this buttery yellow, and then it turns almost like a salmon kind of orange. And then when it's fully open during the day, it is a bright orange. So really interesting tulip. Here in our Japanese maple garden, we're starting to make some progress this spring. George has recently started working on the walkway. He's starting with setting the inside cobblestone border, and then we'll work on getting our flagstones placed for the path, and then some gravel. So it's slowly coming along. We have some cardboard down that's killing the lawn on these sections here that we're planning on putting some plantings. So slowly but surely. And here right below my Katsura Japanese maple, I have a grouping of plants that I started working on last year in the spring, but I lost some plants actually from this area. I had 3 Jack Frost Brunnera, and they didn't make it through the winter. And it's always a bummer when that happens, but it's us against nature, so you're always likely to lose some plants. And so that was it for this area here, the Brunnera. And I also have a couple of Heuchera that are really struggling. They are supposed to be deer resistant, but something eats them in my garden. I can't figure out if it's the bunnies or the deer, but this is pretty much what they always look like. They have a Dollar Tree wastebasket flipped over with a rock so that they're protected. And it doesn't look very attractive, but it's the only way I can get them to sort of recover. And so I picked up some Heaven Sent Jacob's Ladder the other day at the Home Depot, and some of this blue fescue. And I'm still trying to decide if I want to place the blue fescue in this area. But I went ahead and replaced the Brunnera with 3 of the Heaven Sent Jacob's Ladder. And I also have a guacamole hosta that is a nice chartreuse yellow-green that is starting to leaf out. I also picked up some of this Silver Gumdrops Heuchera by Proven Winners, and I really love this Heuchera. It has such a pretty foliage color. Heuchera and I don't really get along. I don't know what it is, but they usually don't do great for me. I don't know if it's my soil, maybe they dry out too much. So between the growing conditions maybe not being quite right and something eating them, it's definitely a struggle. But the Silver Gumdrops Heuchera is actually blooming. I bought it from the nursery that way, so they're probably a little ahead of the season. But they are really pretty. I even like the bloom spikes on them. So this is what the garden is looking like right now in the month of April of 2023. And it's only going to get greener and more colorful from here on out. Thank you for hanging out and spending your time with me. I hope that you've enjoyed this tour, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos, and we'll see you soon.